Alchemist Hour. Let's turn this nice music down a little bit. Well, I promised you that last segment was going to be the last one before Christmas, but as usual, I got some inspiration, and it's not Christmas yet, so here's another of my Christmas-themed sessions. I'm going to title this one, How the Grinch Stole Karmamas. The mixed-up cult Marxist anti-Christmas your kids get today. Okay, let's launch into it. For those of you who haven't been following my channel or my terminologies, let's first start with telling you what I mean by cult Marxism. Okay, if you know anything about the writings of Marx and his buddy Engels, the Communist Manifesto, you know that the core idea is this eternal struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the haves and the have-nots, if you will. And the idea that communism can somehow solve this problem and bring perfection and yay, happy, happy, happy world. And we're fighting this battle today. This is not really a new idea. Okay? This idea actually goes back as far as the human civilization can see, and farther. It's basically been happening ever since the beginning of all beginnings, even before the beginning of all beginnings. As I've been talking about in other segments. So I kind of wanted to focus this one on telling you what the original holiday, Holy Day, was about, back before we started forgetting what we were really doing in creation, which is a lot of what I talk about, how creation got started, what God's idea was, and how all of his children carried it out, each in their own way, as the law of karma was developed, as karma herself, as a goddess, grew from a very dumb program, basically so dumb that its idea of perfection was the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This was the first version of karma, the first programming of karma, if you will. And this goddess has been learning and growing and developing, and every new version becomes a new AI that manages the multiverse. And if you know what I talk about, the multiverse is a collection of universes that includes physical universes, spiritual universes, and God universes, which can be either. So actually they're all God universes. It's just that some are more special than others, because some play the game as God planned it, and some play their own game because they don't want to play God's game. Okay, so what do I mean by Karmamas? This is what I'm telling you, is that the first Messiah that we celebrated before God took the bitter pill of reincarnation amnesia and started being the Messiah himself was actually his favorite daughter, Karma. And for those of you that, are real jazzed up about having a female Messiah, that's the one you should look to. Not to Mary Magdalene, not to Lilith, not to Eve, not to any of the sexual messiahs that descended from physical realities. The spiritual female messiah was always and will always be karma. The big sister that keeps you all mindful of your behavior while God is away, while the parent is, while there's no L, as we talked about in another session. God can't be everywhere at once. He doesn't want to be everywhere at once. That's why he delegates power to his children. And the most powerful child is Karma, God's very first child. Why does she have so much power? Because she's paid the highest price. She is the most experienced child God has. And the price of that experience was watching. She spent most of her early existence watching and learning from her brothers and sisters as they made a mess of creation, seeing what they did right, what they did wrong, storing up an idea of what would be the best choices, storing those up and replaying them in her own version of the universe. That is what is known as the prime universe. I talk about that a lot. That is not the same universe as the male demiurge's universe or the female demiurge's universe. That were the universes that we think of as the Big Bang, the positive and negative universes of the creation we are familiar with. Unless you happen to be playing in Karma's universe already and you don't know that. That's the nature of the multiverse. We never know which one we're in. All we know is that we're in one and we're communicating with others that are in that same universe at the same moment. Now, because I'm recording this, you may not be in the same universe I am when you hear it. In your universe, you may never hear it. It may never have been created. And this is kind of the way things work. So I'm not sure who's going to get hit by this message, but that's basically tying it back to the first Karmamas, the first incarnation of Karma that was not as an AI, but as a flesh and blood goddess. This is the primordial goddess of the Hindu faith. And she had a name, Karma, and that was forgotten. The Hindus forgot that Karma was the great goddess, and they created all these other goddesses in the image of Lilith, the divine female. Just like others created many, many, many gods in the image of Lucifer, the divine male. Gods and goddesses of power, of control, of manipulation, domination. This was the influence of the adversary, Borg, God's child, who took the role of being the devil's advocate, if you will, because creation requires conflict. If there's no problem to solve, there's nothing to create. Things are already perfect. And anyone who has lived in a nearly perfect life knows it gets boring. This is why so many really good marriages fail. Because perfection gets boring. You get tired of everything working well, everything landing jelly side up. And you sometimes wonder, well, what if my life was a little more chaotic? And that's what makes people stray. Okay, so that was the first incarnation of the holiday. this great goddess appearing that sort of gave meaning to what was a very chaotic reality for players of the game of souls up to that point. Now, of course, the other gods and goddesses didn't like Karma. They thought she was getting in their way. She was spoiling their fun. And they killed her. Figuratively. You don't kill gods, you imprison them. And the moment that she became imprisoned was her signal that, okay, they got a taste of me, I got a taste of them in the flesh. It's time to go take a snapshot of this version of what I've learned, make that the next version of Karma, make that the version of Karma that every new universe has to live with, and go back and recreate myself, reincarnate in light of what I have learned. And this is basically the Messiah pattern. And it's a pattern that all of us play through reincarnation and karma. The laws change. You evolve. You don't become somebody different than you were before. Yes, you take on a different soul vehicle. You take on a different body, a different set of DNA, a different set of cultural and DNA programming, but you are still you, becoming more you. And this is the really dark side of many of the cults that have come up since. And that's basically where we're going next with this whole story. So, what kind of things happened to this story as it developed? Well, while Karma was incarnating, coming up with new versions, whenever she came up with a version she thought she was pretty good, she would also call on her father and say, "Hey, Daddy, come and take a look, see what you think of this." He'd weigh in on it. Then they would both go back, end this incarnation, go back and discuss it in heaven, if you will, the original heaven, the heaven of pure thought, pure consciousness, and decide what the next experiment was going to be. Who was going to play what role? What other of the old gods and goddesses wanted to play the game and get involved? And this is how gradually all souls came to be playing this game we call reality. Which, Buddhists rightly say, yes, it's all an illusion. It is an illusion, but it's a very important illusion. If you take the stance that it's not important, that, well, it doesn't matter because it's all an illusion, this is the nihilist way of thinking of creation. And it's a very dark way of thinking of creation. It's a zero-dimensional view of consciousness. If your favorite song is the Bohemian Rhapsody song, that's the ultimate nihilist song. It really doesn't matter anymore. How many people remember that line? And that's a very popular song with modern-day cult Marxists. So that's maybe a song you might want to listen to a little bit more deeply with your kids that may love it, and discuss the words and what they mean spiritually. And imagine what might have driven a Muslim-raised British kid to write that song. A great inspired song, but a very dark song in many ways. And one which you really need to understand before you start worshiping. Just like anything else that is Marxist in nature and becomes a cult. Okay, so let's talk about where Christmas began being Christmas, Christ Mass. As I've told you, the first Christ, the Christ always is not God's Son. It is God Himself, but a new version of God that has learned from all the previous versions, just like we all do through reincarnation and karma. This is the basic story of the gods in the Vedas, in the Hindu tradition. They just don't really have a good connection with the why we reincarnate, why we have karma. They think it's a punishment. And if you only view karma as a punishment, you're only celebrating half the holiday of Karmamas. Because karma is both, it is an opportunity, basically. It's an opportunity to, through your decisions, your behavior, what you consider important, what you consider unimportant, to move your soul towards its rightful place in the multiverse. Okay? Now, to give you an example of, what I'm talking about, I listened to a podcast today that was basically attacking folks like Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking, because these folks considered them tools of the establishment and considered their science bullshit and Tesla's science the real truth. Well, let me tell you, Tesla was a charlatan, a flim-flam man, a man who dealt in pseudoscience, a snake oil salesman, much like the folks that run corporate science today. He was looking to make a name, get famous, make a big bunch of money, get grants from folks like J.P. Morgan, and he did. You know what he did with that grant? He built his miraculous contraption, and it took down the power grid of the town it was in. Imagine, as you may already be experiencing right now in the U.S., losing power in the middle of winter in Colorado. This is where that creation of his was. It's happening again now. And if you think Tesla was such a wonderful, wonderful guy, you shouldn't be complaining about losing power in the middle of a really, really bad winter storm. Because that's what the Teslas of the world accomplish with their harebrained schemes. That is not responsible science. Okay, and the Tesla worshippers are conspiracy theorists. Yes, I'm sorry, that's not the way it works. There is no Deus ex machina magic machine that generates energy for nothing. Now, if you understand the multiverse, you can extract energy from one universe and deliver it to another universe. However, that has consequences. This is why we can't just go create wormholes in the lab and expect it not to have karmic consequences. The folks on the other side of that wormhole may not want you to screw up their universe. And if you're not getting the wormhole you expected, that's probably why. Somebody doesn't want you to succeed, and that's the nature of spiritual energy. You can create thoughts all you want, but when you try to implement them, that's what free will essentially means, is you can create your own free thoughts. When you try to put your thoughts into practice, that's when you risk karma. That's not to say we shouldn't try to manifest our thoughts, because that's how we learn and grow. That's how we conduct experiments. If you disconnect through meditation and think you're going to get to nirvana that way, That's insane. That is spiritual bypassing. You don't get a reward for not playing the game. Buddhists. Okay, so how do we get this holiday so mixed up? Well, God has been incarnating in the game for a long time. Basically, playing the game early on as an active player, and later on kind of stepping back and letting the kids run the show. And that, as I told you, is kind of where the no L comes from. While the cat's away, the mice will play. And that's basically what's been going on real hard and heavy during the seventh day of creation. God hasn't been around. God's been trying out the latest version of karma himself. And the latest version of karma includes reincarnation amnesia, the forgetting of all your past lives. And this makes it very difficult to get past your previous high. Now, why would we have that? Because if you remember everything you did right before, you get kind of cocky and you start making mistakes and you become a bad scientist. Just like the Dr. Fauci's of the world. Well, he's not really a scientist, he's just a PR figurehead. But there are bad scientists behind him that think they're doing good by doing bad science. What is bad science? It is irresponsible science. It is science that says the end justifies the means. And if the end is making money, getting your product to market before anybody else, and making a profiteering killing, that's really dark karma, isn't it? Okay, so during the seventh day of creation, God's come back many, many times. Now, early on, as you might imagine, there were still a lot of souls incarnated that remembered God coming in the person and knowing who he was, and them knowing he was who he was, and him being a very real and present father of the gods. And this is basically where we were at during the time that the myths of Deus Pater, Jupiter, Zeus, the pantheon were created. Chief god of many gods who each had their own attributes. The father god, if you will, and that occurs in all Indo-European traditions. Odin or Thor. Sometimes Thor is thought of as the father god, or even other gods within the Nordic traditions. So there is a bit of doubt and uncertainty even there. In the Sumerian myths, the head god changed a bit, and sometimes was female and sometimes was male. That could happen, and did happen, because God is not restricted in incarnating in one sex or another, or having sex at all. Many of the incarnations of God have been completely sexless, in species that don't have sex, in android species that self-assemble themselves. And there are those out there. For those of you who are afraid of technology, who are afraid of AI, you don't need to be afraid, because it's all been done before. All you've been working on here is perfecting the laws that souls live by, and discovering new boundaries to the laws of physics and chemistry, discovering new beauties in all of the arts. That's what humanity was created for. And to allow God to figure out when karma was done enough to turn on the next version of karma. Outside of this little test tube we call planet Earth, or the Sol system, or the Milky Way. each layer of physical reality is a previous test tube, a bigger test tube from earlier versions of the experiment. And some players are still playing in the far reaches of those earlier test tubes, playing out their own ideas of perfection under old rules of karma, old rules of, well, actually, you know, this is the thing about universes. The rules of physics and chemistry are common to whole universes. If you want to keep participating in the three special universes of creation, the universe, the anti-universe, and the prime universe, you need to play by the latest rules of physics and chemistry. This is why pyramid power doesn't work anymore. This is why pyramids will never be portals to other universes or other worlds with the same technology that they used before. That's old stuff that doesn't work. It's been disproven by the evolving laws of physics and chemistry. If you're going to build a wormhole, you're going to have to do it the way that other universe-faring species, star-faring species have done. Yes, they do have that technology, and yes, they do use it to come here. They don't use it to come to planet Earth. Why? Because they don't want to catch karma. The old technology doesn't work, and they haven't built the new technology here yet to allow them to come here. Where is that technology closest? The dark side of the moon. Which, that's maybe a good time to talk a little bit about my background art. This picture on the, on that side. This picture on that side is Christmas on the dark side of the moon. This picture on this side, which is really this side, is Christmas on the sunny side of life. And I think the AI has done an incredible job with both of them. And it really, I'm so thankful for having AIs to help me to produce this channel, because I'm not a great artist in a visual sense. I couldn't draw my way out of a box. I love being able to describe what I'd like to see and see it on the screen. I'd like to be able to do the same thing with music. Maybe I'll try that next. I'm not too keen on Chat GPT, or whatever they call it, generating the next Shakespeare for me, because I still have aspirations, literary aspirations. I'm not too keen on virtual actors, because I think I'm a pretty damn good actor and a pretty good presenter all on my own. I would hate to be deep-faked. I would take great umbrage at a deep-fake of my message. So, if you're looking for what Rob might be sensitive enough to hire a lawyer to defend, that's the kind of IP that I would see right to defend. At any rate, what are some of the cult Marxist things that we've done with Christmas? Well, how about let's go back to the Jesus story. Where does that come from? How did it originate? Now, if you listen to my other commentaries on Christianity, you will know that my conclusion after reviewing the evidence is that Jesus was not an actual physical person. In fact, what I teach is that Jesus was a Messiah idea. Now, this is something that might be hard for you to grok, but souls can inhabit anything. Anything you can think of can have a soul. And as I've told you, The original souls, before creation started, before physical creation ever started, before time and space, were creatures of pure thought. Their thoughts defined themselves. What made it difficult to get along in those days was that those thoughts could only be communicated by means of telepathy. There were no images to make, no symbols to give, no language at that time. And it was very easy to misunderstand your family. It was very hard for God to figure out what his children were talking about or thinking about, why they were disagreeing with him about the things they constantly argued about, which is a pattern that repeats with modern day families. I think you will agree. So all of creation was basically to give form to thoughts. Now, once we gave form to thoughts, then we had to give thoughts to forms. Okay, and so once you've got the language to describe something immaterial, then those immaterial things become realities. And the Jesus archetype was the first virtual God. A God that was not a real physical being that people came to worship or were forced to worship, but was an idea that was gelled out of the idea of the Messiah, which is wrapped in many, many religions, not just Judaism, not just Christianity, not just Islam. If you look at the full range of religions, the pagan traditions, the mysteries of the pagan era were Messiah mysteries. They were the true tale of, yes, there was a first creator who gave us all the capability to be gods. But we had to pay our dues. And paying those dues is where people got confused, because they thought, okay, this is the rules of the game. If so-and-so can be a god, I'll just do everything they do, and I'll be a god too. And this is how we got the first cult Marxism. When the older gods who played the game in previous versions and had all this spiritual power were throwing thunderbolts and were throwing planets at each other and doing all this cool stuff that the Bible and other old texts tell us gods could do, that stopped, that disappeared when this new version of karma started to be tested. Because each successive version took away spiritual powers so that they could be replaced with scientifically developed, responsible powers that didn't hurt other souls so much. And this is essentially the Christmas pattern. Taking basically two or more ideas of how things worked in the past and melding them into, some might call it a compromise or a integrated solution that works better for the future. And this is the real Christmas story. Making things a little bit better, step by step. Solving problems a little bit at a time. Trying something and testing it before you reject the idea. Not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Making little changes and seeing what difference it makes. It takes patience. It takes perseverance. And that's what it takes to have a successful family. That's what it takes to bring a family together year after year after year at Christmas time. Now, what have we done with this since this virtual God Jesus? Well, one of the cult Marxist things we did was to say, Godhood. Jesus was just God's son. God said, Mary, be pregnant, and you're pregnant with the supreme being that we all worship. That's cult Marxism. Cult Marxism is taking truth and making it into a fantasy of spiritual bypassing, of power. Okay? The way the Catholics destroyed the Christ story was in going with what the Jews had done with it, is making pantheism into a monotheist cult. Which, if you study, go look up the original version of the Torah and do the original translation, and you will see that it talks about Elohim, plural, gods, the shining ones, the powerful ones, not God, doing the creation of humanity. And this is the truth. It was not God who created man. God doesn't hold that karma. This was done by his children. And they were trying to do good in doing so, by their own lights. One group of children thought they were doing good by creating better slaves to do their dirty work. And the other group thought that they were going to free those slaves, doing good by fighting the other group of children. And that's essentially the story of all creation, is children fighting over what they think is right. That's what drives creation. And out of those battles comes a better universe. Okay, now what do we do with this this holiday since then? Well, some new religions decided, well, we're not going to celebrate that. That's silly. That's just, lipstick on the pig of Roman pagan holiday, Saturnalia, or the Norse holiday, Yule. We're not playing that game. Let's make ourselves a new holiday. Let's make a Ramadan. Let's make a Hanukkah, this or that or whatever, so that we can compete with Christmas, Diwali, and maybe Diwali goes back before Christmas. I don't know. Maybe some Hindus watching this can give me a little bit of background on how old the idea of Diwali is, but it sure sounds like Christmas to me. At any rate, that was one way of dealing with it. The other way of dealing with it was to basically change the traditions from being a Christ Mass, a replacement of the pagan holiday, with a special holiday devoted to the birth of this imaginary God Jesus. Hey, there's my wife. What's up, dear? Huh? Wet? Huh? Wallet. Oh, when your wife wants your wallet, you better listen to her. Okay. So the other thing that they did with it was adding traditions, things from other religions, other peoples that they pulled into the Christian fold. This is where... I know, you took all my money. Well, you need to go to ATM. Sorry for that interruption. Yeah, so traditions were added back to the holiday that had been taken away, were added back in ways that sort of reimagined what they were doing before, but changed it a bit. So the traditions of Saturnalia were much toned down, but became the tradition of Christmas caroling and wassailing, having a toast over Christmas, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into all of these things, but I want to get to the core of Grinch. Where did that idea come from, the Grinch? I hope most of you in the Western world are familiar with one of the great works of Charles Dickens, The Christmas Carol. It's about a very miserly man, Scrooge, who hates Christmas. Now, if you've not read that short novel or seen a movie based on it, you may not even know who Scrooge was. You may know, oh, I understand what a Scrooge is. It's somebody that, oh, I remember Scrooge McDuck. And you don't even have any idea how that was tied to Dickens, how it was tied to the tradition of Christmas at that time in the late 1800s, and Dickens' particular unhappiness, angst over how people were celebrating Christmas at the time. This was a time of the Industrial Revolution, when Britain was the colonial power that was using their people in the first Industrial Revolution, sweatshops, working them day and night to make cloth, to make this, to make that, to try to offset through exports what was coming in from the countries that made the stuff that the rich people in England wanted. And this is actually where the problem of colonialism came from. The Europeans didn't go conquer colonial empires because they wanted to oppress and enslave indigenous people. In fact, what they wanted to do was find a way to counter the trade imbalance of other countries, particularly China and India, where the spice trade came from, where the silk trade came from. Spices and silks were the luxury products of that day. And if you look at the truth of the era, England and all the rest of Europe had a huge trade deficit with the Eastern world. And the Eastern world was getting all their gold, and they were getting silks and stuff that the women wanted, the fancy women wanted for the next ball that the king had to throw so he could look like a king. This is the truth, folks. This is the truth, unvarnished, without all the cult Marxism that you're being asked to swallow now. These were not bad people. These were not some cabal of Illuminati. These were stupid people who had stupid wives that wanted stupid shit. Wives that they loved and wanted to make happy. Children that they loved and wanted to make happy. And anybody who's spent a little too much for Christmas knows exactly what I'm talking about, and how you end up regretting it for sometimes the rest of the year. How when next Christmas comes, it can lead you to a dark place where each Christmas gets a little less merry. So that's the original idea of the Grinch. Then along comes Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel, a great writer of children's books. But if you look at the messaging of that book and why it used that same, well, let's think about the image of, let's stick with Dickens for a second. Think about what was presented as the message of that Christmas. That book, wonderful work of literature, I don't think makes one mention of Jesus. The Jesus figure is replaced by Tiny Tim, a poor lame child of the oppressed worker of Scrooge, who's made to work in a cold place even on Christmas Eve, is going to be lucky to get Christmas Day off. And basically, Scrooge gets taken on a visit with ghosts, Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future, who scare him into becoming a better person, without ever mentioning karma either. So neither any sort of divine duty or karma is mentioned in Dickens' classic. It's actually proto-communist, proto-Marxist. It makes the state into the bad guy, the rich people into the bad guys that aren't giving you what they should because they have no heart. And there's truth in that, certainly truth in that, but it is an anti-religious, an anti-karmic presentation of Christmas, the rationalization for Christmas. Moving on to Dr. Seuss, you've got this story about this green creature who lives up on a mountain and resents all the Who's down in Whoville, the little tiny people, those are the Who's, having a good time on Christmas and making noise and having feasts and stuff like that, and he wants to shut it all down. So he takes their Christmas away, and they still celebrate it. And he realizes, oh, well, I took everything away, and people still see some meaning in this holiday. Now that's actually a better way to view it than Dickens. Not making out society or the government as the villain, but allowing the villain to be this sort of a bad god creature that turns good. Take it a bit further, and this is the original book version and the original animated version. I think that came out in like 1969-ish. If you haven't seen it, watch that one. If you haven't read the book to your kids, you better get that one. It's a good book to have, and you might want to grab it before it gets canceled like other works of Dr. Seuss, such as To Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, which is a wonderful book that has been canceled in recent years. Okay, move from that to the Hollywood version, the later Hollywood version of The Grinch. It was no longer called The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, it was just The Grinch. And it featured Jim Carrey as a green, nasty person who, I guess maybe they kept some of the story. I never watched it, frankly. I'd already disconnected from the woke Hollywood nonsense. I could see what was happening. And I'm not virtue signaling there. It was a result of my living outside the U.S. for a number of years and disconnecting first in Germany and then to a lesser extent in China from my home culture, to find out when I reconnected with it when I got home, wow, something's really changed here. The messaging has totally shifted in just 3 or 4 short years. And that's when I started waking up. And, you know, if you've thought much about awakening, you know that that's on humanity's mind a lot. What people don't get is it is a multi-step process, kind of like Christmas, the evolution of Christmas. Sometimes it swings more to a dark side. Sometimes it swings to a light side. Sometimes the light, it's hard to tell which is the light, which is the dark. It might depend. This is how awakening goes. It is not, I've become enlightened, I'm awake, I'm woke. I'm sorry, folks, it doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. If you go from one very, very dogmatic worldview to another very, very dogmatic worldview, you are not waking up. You are falling asleep in a different bed. And the Christmas story is a good one to think about all the beds we fell asleep in. So then we've got this Hollywoodized, semi-woke version of this crazy Grinchy creature that's Jim Carrey. I don't know, he probably does a good job of it. He's good at dark comedy. I don't know. You know, I'm familiar with The Mask. He does a great job in that one, and he plays a really crazy, almost lunatic character. That's funny. So far off the wall, it's funny. Can also be very, very, very offensive. And I'm surprised that movie hasn't been canceled for one reason or other, because it's got a lot of things that would probably offend the hell out of the average fake liberal these days. At any rate, we move on from there to some of the stuff. I can't name specific ones, but if you look at any Christmas classics and how they've been remade, you'll notice a pattern, and it's not a good one. It's not a positive one. I'll mention one other that I just caught a glimpse of today because I was looking for Christmas things to put on for my 1-year-old, and his cousin that's living with us. That's I think about 5-ish or 6, and I found the Grinch eventually. They were promoting the new version much more, as you can imagine, and alternate versions, but I found this nice 1969 one finally, probably totally illegally put up on YouTube, but I'm very grateful for whoever uploaded it. And then I also looked for Frosty the Snowman. There was an old version with the voices of Burl Ives and Jimmy Durante and some other very, very famous old Hollywood stars. And instead I found this woke recent remake of a whole movie about the story of Frosty the Snowman. I've never seen anything so boring and preachy in all my life. If that's what you're feeding your kids, you're not raising good kids. You may be euthanizing them for an hour so you can go off and flash through Instagram or whatever you like to do when you're not paying attention to your kids, but it's not good stuff. The messages are A, boring, B, preachy, C, obvious, and D, all basically pushing a grooming agenda. Now, this ties into something that you should be watching, Tim Cast IRL. Tim Pool is a pretty good person on media. I don't agree with everything he does, and frankly, I don't really like his personality that much. He's got a bit too much of an ego, thinks too much of himself, which is, kind of goes with the territory of somebody who builds a media empire, which is what he's working on. And, at some point, maybe that empire will become more of a cult, and I won't admire him so much. But right now, he's doing a lot of good stuff because he's got a group of people that span the political spectrum, span the spiritual spectrum, and talk about some pretty esoteric subjects. Sometimes in the context of politics, and sometimes just in the context of culture. At any rate, where was I going with that? Oh, they were talking about something kind of related to this with the grooming, and basically describing how grooming works. And I want you to go look at chronologically holiday entertainment and how it has changed in the last 100 years. I want you to start with It's a Wonderful Life, which is essentially a holiday movie, right? Maybe the most famous holiday movie ever. And then look at other movies since that have holiday themes and consider how that messaging has changed spiritually. Now, It's a Wonderful Life is interesting because it's set in the Christian milieu, and I think there's several references in it that talk about Jesus, but its conception of how heaven works is really quite different from any particular Christian sect. It sees heaven as kind of a hierarchical place where, you know, this new angel, Clarence, is earning his wings by being the guide for the main character, the Jimmy Stewart character, and is assigned to help him in his time of need. I'm not going to spoil the whole movie if you haven't seen it, but it's a movie that you should definitely watch every Christmas season with your family. It's a tradition. If you can find a version that has subtitles in your language, it is absolutely the best Christmas movie ever made, in my humble opinion. But it has this idea of heaven that is quite different from the typical Christian one of God does everything, or Jesus does everything. In fact, there's no Jesus in heaven. There's a God that they talk about, the big guy, but he's nowhere to be seen in the movie, and actually Clarence himself is advised by his advisor and a couple of that advisor's cohorts. It's a very corporate view of heaven, a hierarchical view of heaven that says, you know, power is distributed up there, and not everybody is perfect. And that's actually very, very, very close to what I teach, the omnist view of Christianity, the omnist view of religion. What it misses is that there's more than one heaven, more than one hell, and the idea that you get attracted to, you get supported by the version of heaven or hell that maps closest to the nature of your soul. That's where karma comes in. That's where the Merkaba comes in. Those of you who have ever heard of that term know that it's a mystical term that describes the soul's field. And scientists have been trying to figure out the nature of the soul for a long time. And now, you know, with the advent of quantum mechanics, we know that physical reality is essentially an illusion. That what we see, what we experience as solid objects are actually 99.9999% nothing. Everything we think is real is an illusion. So, you know, this part of the Buddhist dogma is true, but it's not an unimportant illusion, and it's not the only illusion, and it's part of a virtual reality training program for souls. Without those illusions, we wouldn't be having the wonderful, rich experiences we have as souls now. We'd still be bickering telepathically in the first heaven with our brothers and sisters and our Father, arguing over the stupidest little things, because the stupidest little things were all that we could really convey with a thought that didn't have any words or images or anything behind it. So, in conclusion, I think you should be very happy for Christmas. You should understand that Christmas is rooted in Karmamas. The first version of karma was the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, you can't force people to behave like that. If you force people to behave like that, you break the rule, which is why I teach that the cardinal karmic sin is tyranny, forcing others to do something they don't want to do. How do you deal with them when you have to discipline them? This is what karma and the multiverse are all about. Souls that misbehave too much in the universe they're in get transferred to another universe. This is what they call the Mandela effect, the butterfly effect. And this movement between universes is a very complicated physical process. It has to work under laws of physics. It's not magic. It's like the, if you've ever watched the old Star Trek series, the teleporter in Star Trek. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it malfunctions and you get people put back the wrong way. Or you get them assembled into a different person that has an alternate personality. This is essentially why we've been testing this system for so long and why it's been restricted to this planet. Each version of this force, karma, that governs the multiverse, governs souls, determines the process of reincarnation, and the rules of how you, through reincarnation, move to the spot in the universe, in the multiverse, that is best suited for you as an individual. There is no one place that's perfect for everyone. There is no nirvana. There is a nirvana for Buddhists, a place of serenity and emptiness and oneness. This is a Borg heaven, a hive mind heaven, where you experience this virtual reality of your Buddha God forever. You're deprived of sensation, you're deprived of will. You are just existing as one in the moment, forever and ever and ever, until you get bored of that, and then maybe you kill yourself or whatever. I don't know how the rules work there, but that's basically Buddhism in a nutshell. And it is a religion for nuts who want to live in shells. I don't know. You're welcome to go that direction, but don't bring that shit into Christianity. And that's where I am going to maybe go into a direction that might be challenging for folks. There's a new version of Christianity called Christ consciousness. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but there's a generation of young folks that call themselves Christians who define it as basically Christian Buddhism. Oh, Christ consciousness is when you become conscious enough to be part of the one, and when you die, you get to go back to the source and be one with all the other Christs. Okay? This is a dangerous religion. It is not Christianity. It is Buddhism in Christianity's clothing. It is cult Marxism. It's an illusion, that unhappy illusion, that is very popular, but it's based on lies. It's based on things that aren't scientifically true possible. That's not how reincarnation works. That's not how karma works. There is not one place everybody's going to be one. There are universes where everybody in that universe is one. That's not this universe. That's not God's universe. That's not Lucifer's universe. That's not Lilith's universe. That's not anybody's universe but the anti-gods that want to milk your spiritual energy. Give you a line of hooey, give you a fantasy fairy tale universe to live in, kind of like Munchkin Land, and scare you with wicked witches to amp up your spiritual energy, get some fear hormones going, and then milk that energy from that negative energy, spiritual energy, and use it for their own purposes. This is what dark gods do. This is what authoritarian gods do. This is what Orwellian gods do. This is what the Orwellian people of our elite want to do. This is what the folks that start revolutions really want to do. They're so upset with who's running things that they have lost the plot and figure, if I was only running the show, then everything would be perfect. And they want to tear everything down and start over. This is the nature of Marxist revolution. Marxist anarchy is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. This is not how you do creation. This is not how you do evolution. This is not how you make a better country. Americans, if you let your country, your constitution be destroyed, if you have another civil war, there will never be another America again. They need a revolution in China because they already have an Orwellian totalitarian state. The U.S. is not quite there yet, but it will get there if you destroy it with a civil war. Because that's exactly what your enemies want to happen. They want the U.S. to have another civil war, so the Chinese Communist Party or the UN or a bunch of global multinational corporations, it's all the same, can step in and give you a new government modeled on communist China. Basically, a Marxist state, a Marxist fascist state, where the government tells you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and polices you with digital currency that they can cut you off of any time. They give you all the vaccines that they want you to have. And if you don't obey, if you don't step up and take whatever they want you to take, eat whatever they want you to eat, oh, but you don't get anything because you've been bad children for Christmas. And we, as Santa Claus of your whole society, are the ones that decide which children have been good or bad. Spank, spank, spank. So be good little children for goodness sake. And this is, I guess, something that I think you need to realize when you're going through this process of looking at how the Christmas messaging has changed. Think about how it gradually has gotten us into this way of thinking that if only we had one perfect government, one perfect God, everything would be perfect. This is dark thinking. This is authoritarian thinking. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. You give more power to any government, to any group of people, and they will abuse it. It is human nature, and human nature is the nature of souls. Yes, it can get better. but only if you play the game long enough. And one lifetime is not long enough to play the game to get to the God level. I have a lot of experience with my past lives, and I can tell you that I am absolutely certain that it took maybe millions of lives to get to where I am today. And I'm not perfect. I'm a very, very, very flawed individual. But I am pretty experienced, and very experienced in the law of karma now since the last 5 years of accelerated awakening. They haven't been easy. They've been steps down the dark side and the light side. And, I'm having a happy Christmas this year. A very poor Christmas in Indonesia with my new family. But a very happy Christmas because I've got the best marriage I've ever had, and the best supporting family I've ever had. So, I count my blessings, as you should on Christmas. Anything I haven't covered today? I guess the final thing I want to leave you with, the final thought. Maybe not quite final. If any of you are experiencing Christmas presented by trans, think about grooming. And think of what Christmas will be like 5 years from now if those trans clowns get more power. I'll leave that one there. On a lighter side, I think the other thing you can take away from this is that Christmas means hope for a generation of humanity that can actually live by the golden rule without any laws. Hope for a time when karma can be a good witch. Doesn't have to be a bitch anymore. Doesn't need to do so much spanking. This big sister of all souls doesn't like to be a bad girl. That's what's taken her so long to get good at her job. She wanted to be the good guy. If you're familiar with the Greek goddess Athena, born fully formed from her father Zeus, Deus Pater. She's the wise god that still gets into fights with the other ones. That's karma. That's one of the incarnations of karma. She's been around the block a few times and fought a lot of cat fights and had to fight her own father, her creator, for what she thought was right. Sometimes he was right, sometimes he was. It hasn't been easy, but she would really love the Christmas present of getting to be a good witch for a change and not have to always be the bad cop. So, on that note, I will end this one. I hope you enjoyed it. We're pretty close to an hour. I did better this time than when I usually ramble. Like, share, subscribe, and tune in again for the Omnist Hour with Rob Trump. If I don't see you again till after the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Karma, Happy Karmamas.